The views expressed here are those of the authors and do not in any way represent the views of Sophia TV.
Assalamualaikum and welcome to another edition of Ladies First. I'm joined here by my wonderful panelists, Sister Amina, Nishad and Sara. Let's just get straight into it. What I wanted to discuss was, and we can't avoid the discussion, is what's going on in America with the presidential Republican candidate Donald Trump. I'm sure you ladies are aware that there's a lot of talk and discussion, especially in the media, with Donald Trump's policies, especially to do with Muslims and Mexicans. What I'd like to focus on is both issues, but in particular his Muslim agenda. Now, he's run a very big ad campaign, and as we know in America, they spend millions on ad campaigns. Now, Donald Trump, as we know, is very big in business, and he's been quite successful. But he has some policies that are a little bit unnerving for us Muslims everywhere. And what they are is he is basically appealing to a certain demographic, I want to say, in America, very conservative, grassroots, Republican demographic. And what he wants is basically, he wants to, he's stating a claim that he wants to control the borders more with Mexican people coming into the country, America, illegally, and also to stop all Muslims. Now, I have been following this because of my own agenda, having some American ties. Just wanted to know, what were your feelings? I'll start with Sister Amina. What do you think? Or do you think that he has a right to address what he thinks most Americans feel towards Muslims? He is stating that he is protecting the interest of America as a whole. Your thoughts?
Well, it's the oldest trick in the book, frankly. I don't really think it has anything to do with Islam or Muslims or even Mexicans. Simply put, one of the ways people come to power is through having an enemy. If we went back a few decades, he would have been talking about the communists. Maybe during World War II, it would have been the Japanese. And when you have an enemy, you can point at them and say, they're wrong, therefore we're right, and we're going to be okay as long as we guard ourselves against them. I mean, it happens all over the world. And the fact is, to my understanding, he's reaching out to a demographic which has been having a hard time. The economy has not been as good in America as it has been in the past. Unemployment is on the rise. A lot of people don't necessarily have their houses anymore. And so it's easy to point fingers at certain things. Also, if you add to that the stress of the wars, and of course, I mean, I don't wish to belittle the suffering around the rest of the world, but I'm saying also the average person in America who sends their kids or their cousin or whatever to fight in the Middle East or South Asia, they're not usually the most well-off people, necessarily the most educated people. They're the people who basically send their kids to the army for money and financing for education. So he's appealing to people who are having a tough time and playing on that, and people who do want some sort of change. And also, unfortunately, this sort of fanaticism, one can say in human nature, is there among a lot of people. I mean, I hate to use the analogy, but you look at Hitler. You know, what was one of the ways he was able to actually promote his platform? By appealing to that sort of tribalism, fanaticism, us versus them. We're going to defend against them and be a better people, and we're going to prosper. So that's really what's going on. It is, of course, quite sad that it is happening, but it has happened time and time again in history.
But what's also interesting is he has a lot of support from his candidates in his party. We had, what I found interesting is Dr. Ben Carson, who is an African-American, very world-renowned doctor, who also had the stance of basically Muslims do not follow the American ideology. And we also have, I think it's Senator Cruz, who I believe it has some Hispanic connection himself, who also has provided his support for Donald Trump. So can we really blame him for really highlighting what people are too scared to say?
Well, again, the government has made Muslims the enemy for about 10, 15, maybe 20 years. And I don't think it's accidental. I mean, first of all, the government had an agenda in certain majority Muslim countries, largely related to oil and political or military influence. But secondarily also, again, like I was saying, a government like that needs an enemy in order to keep itself in power. And unfortunately, there has been a generation that has been brainwashed. I mean, I was in America over the summer, and I was really shocked at all of the anti-Muslim propaganda, just how bad it's become, the types of things that are put on TV. So unfortunately, this is how it is right now. But I do feel, again, that it's not necessarily anything particular to Islam. You know, like over here, sometimes we talk about a clash of civilizations and so forth. It's just finding a scapegoat.
Have any of you been to America? Well, obviously, you haven't been to America, but have you been to America?
I've been to America about 3 years ago. And I was told, oh, you got to be careful, you know, when you reach the airport and they're looking at your passport. I'm thinking, oh my God, what am I going to do? Well, funnily enough, I get there and I get a Palestinian man at the you know, at the airport, you know, asking me questions about, you know, where I'm going. And it was fine. And I didn't notice any, and I wasn't there for very long. But coming back to Donald Trump, you said about his ad campaign, and you know, the ad campaign says, oh, we're gonna chop ISIS head and get their oil. So it just goes to show the agenda behind. You know, you're worried for ISIS and Daesh and whatever they might do to your country, but then to then go ahead and say, oh, we're going to chop your head and then we're going to take your oil from you. It just shows what his intentions really are.
Well, I think it's a bit of semantics with the language, the type of people that he's going for. Let's not forget when Bush was in power, what did he say? I'm going to smoke Bin Laden out of the cave or whatever. Well, sorry, we're in 2000 whatever. What does that mean?
But then he didn't stop there. He didn't just stop there at, oh, I'm going to chop their heads off. But then he then went ahead and said, like Sister Amina said about, you know, it's all to do with oil. He then went ahead and said, oh, I'm going to, you know, take their oil from them.
Well, because basically oil is, just to be devil's advocate, that's how they're getting their revenue. So he's saying if they're using it to come and, you know, take things from my neck of the woods, and I'm going to cut that off. And
but that goes to show the type of person you are. If that's the way you're going to be dealing with things, you know, and targeting Muslims for that.
Well, my other question was, when you stated you went to America, this is one issue that America has, and I think we're starting to have the same problems here. Did you go to an area were you just touristing, or did you go to an area that was predominantly Muslim, predominantly one ethnic group?
It was for about 3 days, and I only went for a wedding, so we were all, you know, chauffeured everywhere. And
I think that's one problem that they have, is that with many Americans, especially in the Muslim community, they kind of stick to certain demographics. So in Detroit, you'll have the Arab community. You don't mix with the blue-collar people in Detroit. So, and that makes Americans think them against us.
But that's Detroit, though. Detroit isn't, and Dearborn especially, isn't representative of America. I think you find in most of the country, it's the opposite issue, that the Muslims are so spread out, there is really no geographic community. Like here, for example, in London, I can go to Cricklewood and find, for example, Arab Muslims. I can go to somewhere else and find Asian Muslims. And there are certain neighborhoods that are known for that. But I think in most places, you know, you might have like a couple Muslim kids in a class, for example, one Muslim in an office, so you don't actually have the concentration. They're there, but whether that means necessarily people know about Islam or even recognize you as a Muslim is a different matter.
So how do you feel about the issue of Donald Trump?
I want to talk about the wall that he proposed and his idea of stopping Muslims coming to America. I mean, looking at other places where a wall was built to restrain people, it hasn't really worked, and it's become, like, for example, in Gaza, it's become such a suppressive tool. And, well, like you mentioned in the Nazis, like, it doesn't really solve any issues that he might think that are there.
And it's illegal as well.
Yeah. And I wanted to ask, how would he test who is a Muslim and who's not a Muslim? Because
as in coming into the country. Well, that's an interesting question, because as we know, not all Muslims look the same. How would you test that? Would you have to do a pledge of allegiance? Would you have to say it backwards just to test it? I just don't know what I don't know what his parameters are. But I think he's very smart and calculated, that he's reaching an audience. And what is interesting is that I'm finding a lot of Muslims who would traditionally vote Republican because they're conservative with their values, they want to show that they're part of the team too, and he's not accepting them at all. We had the lady who had the American flag, hijab, who went into...
He asked her to leave, right?
Well, he didn't. The audience booed her and she left, basically. So how... I mean, part of me feels like, well, why would you go to a conference that you know doesn't really want you there? And kind of... What are you trying to prove? They don't want you there, but don't go. But at the end of the day, it's her right to say, look, I'm different. Yeah. But what I do think with the war, going back to your war thing, America does have a problem with immigration. And basically, the wall that they have there now isn't properly manned, and people try and go through. And again, as you said, there's an economic crisis at the moment, and they're seeing, like we have here, like all the Eastern Europeans taking jobs. That's what they're doing, but they're also contributing to the economy, doing jobs that I wouldn't want to do, quite frankly.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. The economy would collapse if everyone stopped coming from Mexico. I mean, they're paid less than minimum wage. They do the farm labor. I mean, not every Mexican, obviously. There's people who go to university and so forth. But all of them are farm workers, janitors, these things. They work hard. They come basically because they need to, because there's so many problems in Mexico. And to be honest, a good chunk of America was Mexico a couple hundred years ago. For example, I'm from California. You know, I mean, where I'm from used to be part of Mexico. So, you know, to sort of be historically revisionist and say, well, this is America and this is our land. I mean, okay, it was attained, you know, via war. But it's not like there's some sort of firm historical boundary there. I mean, in fact, that's basically how America was formed, settlers coming over there and taking land from certain people. But the cultural links are quite strong. I mean, I used to teach in a school that was 99% Mexican, so it's not really cut and dry per se. And I think it's just talk, because at the end of the day, someone as intelligent as him knows that, yes, on the one hand, there are people who are going to try to blame their problems on illegal immigration, but on the other hand, they need the illegal immigration.
But he's in the lead. And it's not just working class people who are following him. This is big business. They are worried about their country. So what are Muslims doing? Do you think we should be more vocal in saying, look, I need to be accepted. I've lived here for 15 years. Well, what are we doing? Do we not have a responsibility? Maybe we're playing into all the stereotypes that he is spewing out there.
I think voicing what we are like, educating Donald Trump maybe about what we really are like, and you can't generalize that because you've got a little small problem that all the Muslim generation, all the Muslim population in America are going to be like that.
But it's not a small problem. They blew up the World Trade Center. The biggest image of America was blown up.
But maybe then we need to distinguish between why that happened and who it was done by, and the everyday Americans who just really want to get on with their lives. Like, they have no interest in all this thing that's happening. They're just everyday people.
Yeah, what he's saying about we have to find out what's going on with the Muslim problem and why they hate us, I mean, that's really, it's a bit over the top. I mean, anyone as intelligent as him should know why there is animosity towards America in certain countries around the world, and it has nothing to do with Islam. It really has nothing to do with race. It has to do with American foreign policy and the military, economic policy. Supporting dictators, tyrants, meddling in other countries' governments, and so on and so forth. So this is just rhetoric, and it should be seen for what it is. He's appealing to, one can say, the worst side of human beings. He's appealing to people's difficulty, and unfortunately, one of the unfortunate sides of America is that there is a glorification of a certain, one can say, violent and slightly arrogant culture. He's appealing to that too. I'm not saying everyone has that, but there is that strand there. I mean, you look at his support for guns, for example. There are certain people who pride themselves on their ability to shoot, keeping guns in the house, kind of I'm going to be a man or even a woman with that. And I think these are some of the worst sides of America, and there are good sides of America, but that's not what he's appealing to.
But the thing is, it's the most educated people that are on his side. So what would you say to them? I'm sure they've been through the school system and they've learned about there's different cultures. So what would you say? I don't think he's some dinosaur, some guy from the caveman era dragging his knuckles on the floor and doesn't know what average Muslim is.
No, he claims he has Muslim friends.
Yeah, I read
That's
Just in case the viewers don't know, that's sort of a running joke in America. Like if you're racist against blacks, you say, no, I have black friends. So that's supposed to make you not racist. So that's his Muslim friends deal.
I read that he said he has Muslim friends who agree with him as well. So
yeah, I'm sure he does. Just like Bush had Muslim friends.
But that's interesting as well what you said, because over here, bringing it back home, when we look at immigration issues here and how people are starting to have some Islamophobia breeding here, what you will have in certain communities, say traditionally Afro-Caribbean communities, they'll say, well, we came here and worked, but as opposed to the Romanian community that just come and get our jobs and blah, 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 we don't want them either. So the same thing's happening in America.
But not with the Muslims. You have to remember that when it comes to immigrant Muslims, which is not the entire demographic, but America's got a selective immigration policy. So the majority of Muslims in America are upper middle class or upper class, so usually doctors, skilled engineers.
Have a certain amount
of
money.
So it's quite different from here. So they're rating people who, who already, they've got wealth, they've got education, and they're filling higher class jobs. So you're not getting the Muslims are coming and stealing our jobs. That's for the Mexicans. Whereas over here it's a bit more the Muslims are coming and stealing our jobs. No, it's just a sort of playing on xenophobia in this case.
But what about that age-old quote where I'm sure he's mentioned that, the Quran isn't, a peace-loving book, that the religion was spread by the sword, and there's a verse in the Quran that says, kill all the infidels or whatever. Yeah. So
he hasn't
naturally being Muslim, we can't live in peace apparently.
But you can't deny that there are some verses in the Quran that do have instruction that are like what you mentioned. But that's like any religion, any society that is set up has certain rules in every area of life. There's wartime rules, there's peacetime rules. You look at the Bible, that it's not all verses about love. There's verses about wartime as well. So I don't understand totally where he's coming from. But as you were saying, you can't say that he's a caveman. I'm sure, like in his area of knowledge and his business, he's an expert. But reading his quotes that he said about the Quran, you have to doubt if he's even read the Quran, because he was saying something like, there's some negative vibes from people that read, and you're like, what do you mean negative vibes from the Quran? I honestly didn't understand it. So
maybe that's our job to do. Maybe as Muslims we need to be more proactive. Maybe it's our job to go out there and say, actually, this is what we represent. I've been paying my taxes for how many years? What would we need to do to get people to like us?
So I don't think we should go out there and show people. I think that should be within us anyway. The akhlaq that the Prophet has shown us, we live by them day in, day out. Because this thing has come to us on our face, now we're going to have to, boldly go out there and show how we're doing what we usually do, But I also wanted to mention with Donald Trump, it's hitting the minority. He's not just talked about Muslims and Mexicans. He's then gone and talked about women, as in the minority, and he's also talked about people with disabilities. So targeting a minority is not an intelligent and responsible way of campaigning what you're running for.
This is definitely true, but I do feel for my son, he's really troubled because as I've said, he's American and he travels there quite often. He's worried about where does he fit in, because how do you identify, being American? What do you have to do to be American, and what do you have to do to be a Muslim, and what he's highlighted, Donald Trump as well, is that when you look at terrorist activity, what they're doing is they're aiming at very poor groups, and a lot of the revert people who tend to be African Americans who are being brainwashed into some crazy ideology. Now, he feels that he's lumbered on so many levels, and it's quite scary for him. But what I'm not seeing is, I don't think that we've brought it on ourselves, but what did we think would happen if we just chugged along, didn't integrate, and didn't kind of show another side of ourselves? And there are communities that have done that, but now we're in a situation where it's like a a runaway train. This man may actually become president of the United States.
I wasn't aware there's an issue with integration of Muslims in America. As far as I know, the vast majority of Americans are quote unquote integrated. I mean, we live in the same neighborhoods as other people, we work with other people, we go to school with other people. There are a lot of Muslims that intermarry with people of other faiths. I mean, of course, there's exceptions, Dearborn being perhaps the most prominent one, but it's not like here where there is actually an issue of integration. Now, some people might say there's over-integration, and there's a lot of Muslims who change their names to, Mo and so forth. Sam, that sort of thing. They don't want to wear a headscarf, they don't want to look different, they want to go to prom, whatever, and be like everyone else. So one might say there's maybe more of a tendency to assimilate, which is a little bit different from integration. But I think it's never right to blame the victim, and we do that a lot too in the UK. We always hear people blaming Muslims for not integrating enough. One of the foundational values of America, as you learned in school, is that it's a country built on religious freedom. So there's no state religion, and everyone is welcome. And part of the foundational story of America is all these people coming because they were religiously persecuted. And there's nothing in the Constitution or even the heritage that limits that necessarily to Christianity. It's just religious freedom in general, or the freedom not to have a religion. And also a country, in theory, built of immigrants from all sorts of places. Now, of course, there's loads of racial tension in America. I'm not saying there isn't. But the point is, these are among the main ideals of the country, along with freedom of speech, which means even though Mr. Trump's comments are quite distasteful, he has the freedom to say them. And I think this is really how it should be handled, because he's saying that basically, he's going to make America great again, and he's acting like a true American. But this is not actually the American values that you grow up at least learning in theory. And I think that's the best way to respond.
I think going back to that, the American values is when you look at the immigration and you had, I don't know, those old movies where you had the Italians coming over and then you had the Jewish people coming over and then you had the Polish people. They really wanted to become part of American society, and they were ready to, not have their spaghetti bolognese every Friday. They'd have it on a Tuesday instead, for example. But they really had this thing about, we want to be Americans. And maybe what Donald Trump is saying is, I'm not seeing a lot of Muslims saying, we want to be American. They're choosing their faith over nationality, maybe.
That wouldn't actually be my experience with the majority of Muslims in America. I mean, I would say demographically, a lot of them, they've got Christmas trees, they do things what they think are American. I'm not saying everyone, I guess I'm a bit of a, exception because I happen to be American and Muslim, and I don't feel any need to assimilate to what I believe is the dominant culture, or what should be really American. I'm really American enough without actually trying. And of course, again, it's not everyone who's like that, but I just don't think that's the main issue at hand. And as for faith outreach, I mean, it's a complex situation. Now, with respect to people who are, if I can even use the term ethnically American, like you mentioned, African Americans who are the largest Muslim group. And it's kind of like, why do I need to engage in outreach? This is my country, and I have a right to live however I live. So that's one thing, albeit some people do. But with respect to the people who come as immigrants, I mean, there is outreach that goes on. There are people who do interfaith things. There's people who go to the White House. There's people who do, political lobbying and nationwide Muslim groups and, go on TV shows and radio shows and smile and everything. It's just, and they should be doing it. But I'm just not quite sure that you can really do that anymore. I mean, there's only so much kissing up you can do.
Well, maybe, obviously, according to Donald Trump, we haven't done enough. We haven't, But I remember because I was in America during the 9/11 incident, and I remember, in New York, there's a big, actually, Shia community in New York, that they were the first people to run out of the buildings, and there's a Shia school there, to see if, their neighbours were okay, and, going to the fire stations and making sure the firemen were okay, and that, we were visible, we were there, and we did care. I mean, the Americans who were there, I was there at the time, and I just felt, oh my God, since that incident, things would never be the same. You would always have to justify. I think like after the Second World War, like how the Germans probably felt like, I'm really sorry for being German, I'm really sorry, but it has nothing to do with us. It's just an ideology, but it's just so much, he is appealing to so many people, he's appealing to businesses, because business wants to feel secure and have a president that's going to do whatever it takes to make sure that they're successful. But it's worrying because it's like a cancer and it's spreading. And my thing is, we can't sit here and watch while it's spreading. It's okay to say, okay, why should we say that we're good people and we're thingy? But at the end of the day, what other option do we have? Especially when you have children. Well, I think with Democrats, they also need us. You know, it's politics. Who do you really trust? Who really has your best interest at the end of the day? It's always going to be about money. And
well, that's a bigger ethical question. I mean, many people do argue that it's important to be politically involved. I mean, for Muslims to be politically involved in America, and I do agree. It is important, and we shouldn't just sit there like doormats. But I also personally feel like there are ethical problems with supporting both the Republican and the Democratic Party. So it's just...
Or not voting at all, because the other party, the majority will, win because you haven't voted.
But I do think historically Muslims have tended towards the Democratic Party anyway, because they do have a bit less of that sort of arrogant mentality that Mr. Trump is appealing to.
It's going to be interesting to watch. How do you think the Mexicans feel? Because who are they? Well, you were in America recently. Who are they? Are they going towards Cruz, or are they really enjoying Trump and all of his?
Well, I actually didn't go around asking people their opinions about the election, but I mean, most minority groups do tend towards the Democrats because they are more inclusive. But of course, I don't want to stereotype. I mean, everyone's got their own ideas of how things should be and their own values.
But I think traditionally with the Hispanic community, they've been very Republican because of their core values. But because of the immigration issue, they've gone for the Democrats. But this is interesting because there is a Hispanic presidential candidate. So we don't know how it's going to go. But what's worrying, as I said, is that this person is going to come into power. And what's even more worrying is that he may be coming to England. And we all know this petition, everyone's been going on about this have you heard about this petition for him not to come? How do you feel about signing this petition? Do you feel that any time there's an issue as Muslims, we have to...
Bring out a petition.
Exactly. How do you feel about it?
I think intelligent people, responsible people, will know what to support and who to support. You know, talking about Ben Carson, just recently Pope said something about him not being a Christian because of the comments.
That was Donald Trump, he was saying,
So, you know, you've got such people now speaking out about such ridiculous comments that they're making. We've had Barack Obama say that, you know, being a president of America is not, you know, being, you know, appearing on live talk shows and, you know.
But yet they all do.
But then we've got, I think it's not just Muslims they need to go out there and talk about what, you know, what's right and what's wrong. I think we need the support of other faiths, other
communities, because if it can happen to one group, and we should have learnt from our lessons, it can happen to, they can quickly say, well, I don't like this other person, or I don't like this group. But this petition thing that was going around, you know, signed that he can't come in, most people know that if you're a billionaire, anyone can come into the country if you're a billionaire. So
I think Scotland, the University of Scotland, that denied him his, or took away his degree or something, didn't it?
Exactly, but in Scotland, how many golf courses does Donald Trump own? His business a lot, which does a lot of, you know, brings business in.
The point is that there are people out there who recognise that what he's doing and what he's saying is not necessarily correct and intelligent.
And he's, I think, he is part Scottish now that he's saying, and that's what I also like about, you know, politicians. They always find one part that they didn't know they had, and it kind of attracts. Didn't Hillary Clinton say that her great-grandmother was Jewish or something? Okay, how is that going to help everybody for sharing? But I don't know. What's interesting for me is I want to see how Muslims who traditionally voted for Republicans, how are they gonna feel like they fit in or they're represented? Because he's the leading contender. He's probably going to win. What's going to happen? Because, you know, there's certain things that Democrats believe in that Republicans don't, like pro-choice, immigration issues. How is that how do you see it? Can you call it? How do you think it's going to go?
What do you mean exactly?
Well, with the Republican campaign, who do you think is going to win? We've got Cruz and we've got Donald Trump in the lead? Who do you think is going to be nominated?
I really don't know.
Do you think common sense will prevail?
I hope so.
I'm quite worried. I really can see this man becoming president.
I think even if he does become president, I still can't believe that somebody of that of that position would then carry out what he's been saying, to not let Muslims, into the country. You've got a small one, but it's a massive, Muslim community that we have, like you said, in New York, who do things that, any American would do. Saying it, maybe getting people's votes in, and, he doesn't, once he's got the votes and he's, said all these things to get the attention, who knows, what if he doesn't,
Terry, too. What do you think, Sarah? Do you think he will?
Who's going to win?
Yeah.
Well, I think we're just going to have to wait and see, but we can only pray and hope that he's
not going to call it.
Of course, being Muslims ourselves, we are particularly concerned about the Muslim issue, so to speak. But I think it's important to remember that although, in my view, Muslims are a very important part of America, we are something like maybe 5% of the population, and America does have some serious problems that affect far more people than just Muslims, who by and large are oftentimes better off than the average person. Not everyone, but by and large. And sometimes I feel a bit uncomfortable when, as a Muslim community, we hone in on things like Muslims at the airport, Muslims coming in and out of the country, where it's like, okay, a lot of people aren't even privileged enough to be able to travel and go on airplanes here and there. So I think it is important to take a broader picture, and I think that's an Islamic approach that the Prophet himself would have encouraged us, and peace be upon him and his family, while at the same time not neglecting the fact that this is also inappropriate.
Well, I don't know how to call that. I'm praying he doesn't get in. But if he does, we'll all be ready to have some common sense put back into the world. Really interesting show. Hope you join us soon. Assalamu alaikum.
If you've been affected by anything discussed in this episode, do speak up to find assistance at your GP, local authorities, or helplines online.